Hey guys, I wanted to talk to you guys today about something pretty serious. So, with what has been going on in the world lately, it's really important that more and more people are encouraged to garden and grow their own foods. Food security is a huge topic right now. It is on a lot of people's minds, whether it comes to if you can get a product at the grocery store, or maybe it's just, hey, I can't afford that right now. So with that being said, I wanted to talk to you about something that happened to me last year in my garden. So when we put this garden in, I went on Facebook and I asked my local community if they knew anywhere that I could get some really good soil from. And so I was recommended to a specific place that's local to my town. And they brought in truckload after truckload after truckload of compost for me. It was beautiful. It was dark. It was rich. It just felt good. So I literally paid this company $3,600 for the soil to fill all of my raised beds, as well as the in-ground garden behind me. I started about 1,000 seedlings inside last year. I didn't buy one plant from a nursery except for blueberry bushes and fruit trees. But everything in my vegetable garden I started from seed, and they all looked fantastic. I went ahead and I planted everything out, and for a few weeks things were thriving. And then I started to notice that my tomato leaves had begun to slightly cup. And I thought, oh, you know, they're kind of stressed. They need more water. Maybe they're just protecting themselves from the hot, intense sun that they're getting right now that they're not super used to. But as the season went on, the leaves became more twisted and distorted, and the new growth wasn't even recognizable as a tomato plant. My pepper plants last year never got above this tall. My corn did just fine. My sunflowers did okay. I did have some distortion of their leaves. My strawberries were stunted. My blueberries were very stunted. In fact, they are about the same size as when I put them in last year. They just have not grown. I planted beans. I planted peas. I planted cowpeas. I planted peanuts, and every single one of those crops came up with cupped leaves, and they had very, very slow growth. Now, I did get some production off of those plants. They didn't end up dying, but the production that I got was so much less than I would have gotten had they been healthy plants. So I called in my local extension, and a gentleman came and took a look at the gardens. And he told me that what I had gotten was persistent herbicide in the compost that I had brought in. So persistent herbicides go under 3 different names. There's aminopyrrolid, clopyrrolid, and picloram. So how these things work is basically if you're a hay farmer, or you have horses, or you have pasture and you want to keep that grass nice and weed free, you apply these persistent herbicides to that area. What that does is it stops any broadleaf plants or woody growth from coming up and destroying your grasses in the pasture, but it does not affect the grasses. Then you put animals out to graze on that pasture, or you make hay. So both of those products, whether the fresh grass or the hay, becomes eaten by animals. Now, as they eat it, that chemical gets passed through their digestive system unaltered. And in fact, it even concentrates it, because the amount of grasses and plants that they're taking in with that herbicide, they use that material in their digestion, but then they excrete all of that chemical completely unaltered. Then you make compost out of that. And these chemicals do not get broken down by the heating and composting process. And then you have a local gardener that comes to your facility to purchase compost, and they put it in their garden. They're planning on growing food for their family, and it just devastates and decimates their garden that year. This is becoming more and more of an issue. It is heartbreaking. In fact, it's sickening. I am still dealing with it this year. I reached out to the company last year, as well as my local extension, plus an extension in another state, both confirmed. We reached out to the company that I got the soil from, and they were unapologetic. They didn't care. I received no refund. There was no recourse that I could take at that point unless I wanted to take them to court. These herbicides will remain in the soil from anywhere for a few months to up to 3 or more years. So what type of plants does this herbicide affect? Anything that's considered broadleaf. The better question to ask is, what does it not affect? It doesn't affect grass crops. Things like grains and corn are sort of resistant to its effects. Now, over the fall time, I had good success with my brassicas, so that was definitely a blessing. So what I've done is I've taken soil samples from my raised beds as well as the in-grounds, and I brought them up to the house, and I've put tomato seeds in them, as well as some of them have tomato starts that I started inside that I went ahead and transplanted into that soil. I've also done this with beans. So those are currently in my house right now, growing, and I'm going to see if I have any damage on those plants that would indicate that the herbicide has not yet broken down in my garden. I am starting to see on some of my more mature tomato plants in there that they are beginning to curl slightly. So that is not a good sign. There is a way that you can prevent this from happening in your own garden, and that is to use leaf compost or mushroom compost. Do not use animal manure in your gardens unless you know the direct source where that animal manure or compost is coming from and you are certain that it is not contaminated. Now, if you've already bought compost, you can test it. You can just simply take a little cup of soil, put a bean seed into that or a tomato seed into that, and see if that starts to grow. After the first set of true leaves appears, you will start to notice things if something's wrong. The leaves will be cupped. They'll be very thick or almost look bubbly. As for me, I will never use animal manure again. Even my goats back here that are eating hay, I can't be certain that that hay has not been sprayed. So I can't even use their manure in there. The only manure that I can use is I can use the manure from my pigs and the manure from my chickens. But as far as bringing in some type of composted manure, I will never do that again. In a time when people can't afford to feed their children, it just makes me sick. More people than you can imagine are being affected by this, and every year the numbers go up and up and up. So the question is, what am I going to do with $3,600 of contaminated soil that is in every square inch of every gardening space that I have created? And the answer is, I'm going to plant every single one of my healthy seedlings into this herbicide contaminated soil. And I'm going to pray that by some miracle that God would bless this garden and He would make it fruitful for me. That is the only thing that I can do, is to remember who ultimately is in control, and that is God. So I'm going to put my faith in Him, and we're going to pray for a good garden season this year. Thank you guys for listening to my little rant there today. I hope that it's given you some information, and I desperately hope that you guys are not faced with this in your gardens. So if you guys have any comments or any other information or something that you want to share, please leave them in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to me today.